Hello, hello. I have written a new story for you. I don't want to spoil it too much for you, so let's just get into it.
My in-laws kicked out my 8-year-old daughter from the family car and left her on the side of the road because she didn't have a ticket. When my husband found out, he didn't hesitate. He dialed their number, and what he said made them go pale. The afternoon this happened was supposed to be simple. My daughter Ada, who was 8, had gone to Tivoli with my husband Philip's parents, my mother-in-law Charlotte, and father-in-law Peter, along with Philip's brother Frederick and his children, Freya, Oscar, and Alma. It was one of those family plans that looked harmless on paper. A cousin's day, a few rides, too much sugar, and a tired child coming home with a wristband and a story about the carousel. I stayed home in our apartment in Copenhagen, answering work emails and using the quiet to catch up on laundry. As far as I knew, every detail of the day had been handled in advance. I had handled the Tivoli booking the night before, forwarded Charlotte the booking confirmation assuming Ada had been included, packed her cardigan, slipped her transit card into the front pocket of her backpack the way I always did, and kissed the top of her head before they left. Around mid-afternoon, I remember glancing at the clock and thinking they were probably already in line for something loud and expensive. I did not think I would see Ada again until dinner. Then the doorbell rang far earlier than I expected, and the sound of it changed the whole day. I opened the door expecting Peter with some practical explanation, or Frederick asking if Ada had forgotten a sweater, or even one of the cousins bouncing in first and announcing a schedule change. Instead, Ada was standing there alone. Her backpack hung off one shoulder, one shoelace was untied, and there was a red mark across the bridge of her nose where she had clearly been rubbing at tears and trying to hide them. She was not sobbing. That would have been easier. She had that flat, careful face children get when they are holding themselves together because they do not yet know if they are allowed to fall apart. I crouched down and said her name once, quietly. She stepped past me into the hallway without answering and went straight for the bench where we kept shoes, moving too fast and too small at the same time. I touched her shoulder and asked, "Where's Grandpa?" She did not look up. "Where's Grandma?" Still nothing. She was trying to take off her sneakers with hands that were shaking. I turned back toward the open doorway, expecting headlights, a wave, some adult body somewhere in sight. There was only the street. I walked out onto the landing and looked both directions, then leaned over the rail to scan the road below our building. No parked car with the engine running. No Peter at the curb pretending this was normal. No Charlotte coming up with that brisk expression she used whenever she was about to explain why everyone else had misunderstood her. Our street was quiet in that ordinary Copenhagen way. Bikes chained to a railing, a delivery van 2 buildings down, someone pushing a stroller past the bakery on the corner. Nothing about it matched the child standing inside my apartment with wet eyes and a twisted backpack strap. I went back in and closed the door halfway behind me, not all the way yet, as if I still expected somebody to appear and make sense of this. Ada had stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Honey," I said, keeping my voice even. "Did they drop you off and leave?" She pressed her lips together. Then she nodded once. I asked, "Who left?" That was when she finally looked at me, and what I saw on her face was not confusion. It was humiliation. "Grandma said I had to get out," she said. And suddenly the apartment felt much smaller. I shut the door, locked it, and guided Ada into the kitchen because I needed her sitting down, under lights, with a glass of water in front of her, while my own brain caught up. She climbed onto the chair without protest and folded her hands between her knees, the way she did at school conferences. I asked her to start from the beginning. She swallowed, looked at the table, and said, "They said I couldn't come." I thought I had heard wrong. "To Tivoli?" I asked. She nodded. "So they brought you home?" Another small headshake. "No, they stopped the car." The way she said it was what made me slow down. Not dramatic, not confused, just exact. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "Ada," I said, "I need you to tell me what happened, one part at a time." She twisted the hem of her shirt around one finger. "Grandma said I didn't have a ticket," she said. Then, after a beat, "And then they made me get out." I had known Charlotte could be cold. I had known Peter could sit beside something ugly and call it unfortunate. I had not pictured the sentence my daughter had just handed me. I asked the next question because I had to. "Where did they leave you?" Ada named a bus stop I knew, not right outside Tivoli, but far enough away that they had clearly driven off before pulling over. I asked if Frederick got out with her. No, if one of the older cousins did. No again. Peter had opened the automatic lock from the front. Charlotte had said, "You know the route." And the rest stayed where they were. How did you get home? Ada reached into her backpack and pulled out the little transit card in its blue holder. She set it on the table between us like evidence. "I took the bus," she said. She had stood at the curb reading the display board because that was what we had practiced on ordinary days, never for something like this. Some facts hit the body first. Mine did. My hands went cold. My jaw locked. My daughter had been excluded from a family outing over a ticket category and sent home alone on public transport by the adults responsible for her. That was when the day stopped feeling rude and started feeling vicious. I stood and went to the sink, not because I needed anything there, but because I needed 1 second to fix my face. When I turned back, Ada was already heading upstairs with that child logic that says if I can get to my room, maybe the worst part gets smaller. "Wait," I said. "Did anyone call me?" She shook her head. "Did you call anyone?" Another shake. Then I realized what I should have seen instantly. Ada did not have a phone. We had talked about one for later, maybe when she turned 10, but right now she had none. No way to call me from a curb. No way to call Philip. No way to say she had been put out in the middle of a family outing and told to get home alone. She had only the transit card I had packed out of routine, and the route she knew because we had practiced it in safe daylight for normal life, not abandonment. She kept going up the stairs anyway, shoulders tight, and I followed, calling Philip on the way because by then I knew this was not something he could hear about later. By the time I reached her bedroom door, I knew the story was about to get worse. Ada climbed onto her bed, pulled her knees up, and stared at the corner where the wall met the wardrobe. I sat beside her with a glass of water and waited until she took it. Her room looked exactly the way it had when she left that morning, which made the rest of it sharper. I asked one question at a time. Did she have any way to call me? No. Did anyone offer to call me for her? No. Did anyone walk her to the bus? No. At that, she finally looked at me and said, "Grandma said I knew how to get home." She said it in Charlotte's clipped little rhythm, and that was almost worse than the words. I asked when they said she could not come. "When we got to Tivoli," she said. Grandma checked the e-tickets on her phone while we were still in the car. She rubbed both palms over her eyes. She said mine wasn't there. For 1 second, I thought maybe the booking had glitched or I had missed a step during checkout. Then Ada added, "She said because there wasn't one for me, I couldn't go in." And that was when the ticket stopped sounding like an explanation and started sounding like an excuse. I went downstairs, pulled up the purchase confirmation on my laptop, and Ada came with me, wrapped in my cardigan now, speaking more because motion helped. I thought I had included Ada when I made the booking, but looking at the confirmation, I could see her ticket had never actually been issued. Her name wasn't on the final order. Fine. That is the kind of mistake adults solve in 40 seconds. I said that out loud while I scanned the email. If there was any problem right there, they could have called me and I would have paid for a new ticket immediately. Ada nodded, but did not look relieved. I told Grandma you could pay, she said. What did she say? Ada's mouth tightened. She said that was not the point. I looked up from the screen. Then what was the point? Ada repeated the scene the way children do when they are telling the truth and still trying to understand it. Charlotte checking the tickets on her phone, frowning, showing Peter, then saying in that voice everyone obeyed, "No, this one is wrong." Frederick looking irritated because they were losing time. The cousins suddenly quiet. Nobody saying, "Let's fix it." Nobody saying, "We are not leaving a child out over a ticket adjustment." The silence around the easy solution told me more than the mistake itself ever could. Once Ada started talking, the worst lines came out in pieces, like she had been carrying them home in her pocket with the transit card. Charlotte had said, "Your mother didn't get you a ticket. That is not our problem." Then, when Ada asked if they could just buy one there, Charlotte had said, "We are not wasting more money on one child." Ada repeated that sentence and then stared at me, waiting to see if I would explain it into something less ugly. I could not. Peter had not contradicted Charlotte. Frederick had only said, "Can we decide this already?" As if Ada were a scheduling issue. Freya had looked out the window. Oscar and Alma had stayed quiet in the back seat because children know when the air in a car belongs to an adult. I asked whether anyone said, "We'll all go another day." No, whether anyone said, "We're not leaving without Ada." No, whether anyone told Charlotte to stop talking about me in front of my daughter. No. 3 adults and Ada's 3 cousins sat there while one 8-year-old was told she was the expendable one. By then I no longer cared whether the booking mistake was technically mine. The insult was the real event. The final piece came when Ada asked if she was in trouble. That question told me how the adults in that car had arranged the blame. I moved my chair so I was directly in front of her and said, "No, absolutely not. None of this is your fault." She nodded, but she still needed to say the rest. Charlotte had talked about Ada in front of Ada as if she were not there. Peter had driven away from Tivoli without making a decision in her favor. Frederick had said they would miss their restaurant reservation. Then they had pulled over near the bus stop, and Charlotte had turned around and said, "You know how to get home? Take your card." Peter unlocked the back door. No one got out. No one hugged her. No one said they were sorry. Ada climbed out with her backpack, and by the time the door shut, the car had already become a family car without her in it. She stood on the sidewalk and watched it pull away with her cousins still inside. She said that was when she understood they were really leaving. When Philip's key turned in the front door, I already knew this was not a ticket problem. It was a message, delivered through my child. While I waited for Philip to come upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table and ran through every fix those adults had refused. They could have called me from the entrance, sent a payment link, paid for a new ticket, and let me reimburse them before the ride line moved, turned around, scrapped Tivoli, and taken all the children somewhere else, done the basic human thing and refused to humiliate one child in front of the rest. Instead, they chose the only option that punished Ada and embarrassed me at the same time. That was when the whole design of it came into focus. Charlotte had never liked me. I was older than Philip, already a mother when we met, and immune to her little ranking system of who looked right and who did not. Over the years, she had learned that direct attacks on me did not land the way she wanted. But Ada was different. She was visible, attached to me, loved by Philip, and still young enough to be cornered. The ticket had not created an opportunity. It had given Charlotte cover. Once I saw that, I stopped asking whether they had overreacted. The real question was why I had ever assumed they would stop short of this. Copenhagen gave them exactly the excuse they needed. Children here do have more independence than many American parents expect. They bike to school younger, they learn routes early, they tap onto buses with confidence that still surprises people from back home. Charlotte and Peter knew I respected that, even when I still carried some California caution in my bones. So I opened the transit app and traced the line Ada had taken, stop by stop, and I could see the defense assembling itself before they even spoke it. Safe area. Familiar route. She knew the bus. Children here are capable. All of that could be true and still beside the point. Independence is something you build with a child, not something you exploit when you want to get rid of one. Ada knowing how to come home from a known route did not give anyone permission to strand her on it. It just meant they had chosen a method that looked respectable from a distance. Charlotte would say I was being dramatic because I was American. Peter would say there had never been real danger. They had not counted on danger. They had counted on local norms doing the dirty work for them, and that made it colder, not kinder. 5 years earlier, I had come to Denmark from California with 3-year-old Ada and a plan that was supposed to last 1 year. I already had a Danish passport through family, and a job opportunity in Copenhagen made the reset possible. Her biological father had been out of the picture long before that, and I wanted distance, work, and 1 year of breathing room. Then I met Philip. At first he was just the steady man at a friend's dinner who asked Ada if she wanted her pasta cut smaller, and then actually listened to the answer. Later, he became the person who learned her bedtime routine, her favorite library branch, the exact way she liked oranges peeled. By the time we married, he was not good with kids. He was simply her father in every way that mattered. His parents had never forgiven him for choosing us. Charlotte preferred polished women with no prior life, no child, no complicated history. Peter followed her lead, which was his usual form of loyalty. Philip spent years translating their behavior into something smaller. He called it friction, generational tone, a bad joke, ordinary family roughness. He helped them financially, covered bills, repaired their emergencies, and kept telling himself the next holiday would go better if everyone stayed calm. The warning signs had always been there. There were Christmases when invitations were phrased so narrowly I was meant to decline. There were comments about my age spoken as if Ada could not hear them from the next room. Charlotte once asked whether it was confusing for Ada to call Philip Dad when she had a real father somewhere. Peter let that sit on the table like spilled water. Every gift I brought to smooth a weekend over, wine, groceries, pastries, games for the kids, Charlotte treated like evidence that I was trying to purchase acceptance. And still, there was the family image they all protected. The coastal summer house north of Copenhagen, technically Philip's investment, functionally his parents' stage set. They hosted there, bragged there, posted pictures from the deck at sunset, let Frederick use it like a second home, and built entire seasons of family mythology around that place. Ada loved going because her cousins were there, and the adults behaved better when outsiders might see them. The cruelty. So I kept telling myself the line held. I kept telling myself nobody would ever use an 8-year-old to settle a score with her mother. By the time Philip came home, that lie was gone. Philip found us in the kitchen, Ada wrapped in my cardigan and turning her transit card against the tabletop. He did not come in talking. He set down his keys, crouched beside her chair, and asked, "Can you tell me what happened?" She gave him the short version because by then she was tired. There was no ticket for me. Grandma got mad. They said I could not come. They made me get out. I took the bus home. He listened without interrupting, kissed the side of her head, and told her to go pick a movie for later. Then he stood up, took my laptop, read the ticket email, and asked one precise question. When did they leave her? I gave him the stop name and roughly the time. He opened his banking app, and his face changed in a way I had seen only twice before. While Ada had been on a bus alone, his parents had still used the payment method he had left on Peter's phone for family outings and summer house expenses. There were fresh Tivoli charges, parking, entry top-ups, food. They had thrown our daughter out of the plan and kept spending his money on everyone else. That was when the air in the room turned. He did not rant. He did not pace. He sat down, unlocked his phone again, and moved through screens with the kind of calm that means a decision has already been made. First, he froze the virtual card his parents had access to. Then he removed his payment method from the family wallet Peter still used. Then he canceled the automatic transfer that covered a monthly set of expenses for Charlotte and Peter, and another one that handled utilities tied to the summer house. After that, he flagged the Tivoli charge. "I'm not paying for them to exclude her," he said, almost to himself. I asked whether he wanted to call first. He shook his head once. "No. First I make sure there is nothing left for them to touch." That sentence mattered more than his tone. For years, Philip had dealt with his parents by softening, spacing things out, hoping one decent weekend would cancel 5 ugly moments. What he was doing now was the opposite. He was removing access before discussion, which meant this was not another family argument waiting to be interpreted into nothing. By the time he finally looked up from his phone, the support they had treated like background weather was already gone. Then he said, "Put them on speaker." Charlotte answered on the second ring with the voice she used when she had decided a problem belonged to someone else. "Philip, I was just about to call," she said, which told me she had not been about to call at all. He asked one question. "What happened today?" She launched straight into irritation. The booking was wrong. Ada's name wasn't on the order. They had been delayed. Tivoli was crowded. You could not expect a whole group to stand around because of one mistake. Peter got on in the background to say Ada knew the route home, and children in Copenhagen were more independent than Americans understood. Frederick added something about reservation times and wasted money. Philip said almost nothing. That was the trapdoor. They mistook silence for weakness and kept climbing down it. Charlotte said I was being dramatic. Peter said there had been no danger. Charlotte said I always turned Danish practicality into theater. Not one of them asked if Ada was okay. Not one sounded ashamed that an 8-year-old had arrived home alone and made it back to our building. Every excuse made the same thing clearer. They were not trying to repair what they had done. They were trying to win the framing of it. They thought if they made it sound efficient enough, cruelty would pass for reason. When they finally ran out of justifications, Philip spoke in the same steady tone he used with contractors, which was somehow more devastating than yelling would have been. "You used my money to throw my daughter out of a car," he said. There was a beat of silence on the line. Charlotte started with, That is not what happened. And he cut across her for the first time. It is exactly what happened. Peter tried next. Philip, nobody threw her. Philip cut him off too. Cards are blocked. Your payment access is gone. I've challenged the Tivoli charges. You will not see Ada again. Charlotte's voice sharpened into panic under the anger. Over one misunderstanding? Philip did not raise his. No, over a choice. That landed because it named the thing they were still pretending did not exist. Charlotte began talking faster, reaching for family language, for history, for how much they had done for him, for how children had to learn resilience, for how I had poisoned the situation. Philip let it all pass. Then he said, I'm not debating this. For the first time since the call started, they sounded uncertain. It was not the end. He had one more sentence left. The summer house is in my name, Philip said. I'm selling it. I had known he was considering some response about the house the moment I saw him cancel those utilities, but hearing the words aloud still changed the shape of the room. On speaker, Charlotte inhaled so sharply it crackled. Peter talked over her. Frederick, who had apparently still been listening, started saying Philip could not make a decision like that without talking to the family first. Philip answered him before he could finish. It was never the family's house, he said. It was mine, and I'm done funding this version of us. That was when the excuses collapsed and the panic showed its face. Not about Ada, not even about the blocked cards, about weekends, about summer plans, about guests, about who had already been invited for midsummer and what people would think if the place was suddenly unavailable. Charlotte's voice had gone high and thin. Peter was trying authority and failing. Frederick kept saying this was insane. Philip listened for maybe 5 seconds, then ended the call. Just like that. For the first time all day, his parents sounded afraid, and it had nothing to do with what they had done to a child. The moment the call ended, the apartment went very quiet. Not relieved quiet. The kind that comes after something final has been said aloud and cannot be unsaid. Philip put his phone on the counter and stood there with both hands flat against the wood for a few seconds. I asked if he was all right. He said, No. Then he went upstairs and sat on Ada's bed while she showed him the movie she had picked, and he told her only what she needed to know. She was safe, she had done nothing wrong, and nobody would be taking her anywhere without us again. He did not tell her about the money or the house. Children do not need the adult mechanics of protection. They need the protection itself. Later that evening, as she fell asleep on the sofa between us, his phone lit up with message after message. Charlotte. Peter. Frederick. Then Charlotte again. None of them asked how Ada was doing. The first text Philip opened said, You cannot punish the whole family over this. The second said, We need to discuss the house before you do anything rash. That was the point of no return laid out in bright little letters on a screen. By morning, they were at our front door. Charlotte arrived carrying a pastry box from a bakery she knew I liked, which was how I knew she had come to perform remorse rather than feel it. Peter stood beside her with his jaw set in that falsely patient way men use when they think they are about to correct a younger household. Philip opened the door but did not invite them in. I stood a few feet back where I could hear everything and keep one eye on the stairs in case Ada came down. Charlotte started with tears. Not many. Just enough. We came to talk like family, she said. Philip said, You can talk from there. Peter took over, offended by the boundary before the subject had even started. He said this had all gone too far, that emotions were running high, that adults sometimes made practical decisions children did not understand. Charlotte lifted the pastry box slightly, like evidence of good intentions. "We were going to bring Ada something," she said. Philip did not move. "Ada is not coming to the door." That changed the temperature. Peter bristled. Charlotte's tears dried up in real time. Frederick had apparently stayed in the car because we could see him sitting below with his phone, waiting for the door to open or the problem to shrink. Instead, it got wider. Within 2 minutes, they told on themselves again. Charlotte said people were already asking about summer dates. Peter said there were tools, clothing, and personal things in the house. Charlotte said Frederick's family had planned 2 long weekends there, and guests had already been mentioned. Peter added that if the sale rumor spread, it would create unnecessary embarrassment. I listened to them stack their concerns in order, and my daughter was nowhere near the top. When Ada finally did come into a sentence, it was as proof of innocence. "She got home fine," Charlotte said, as if outcome erased action. Philip answered, "That is not a defense." Peter tried to redirect. "We all said things in the heat of the moment." Philip said, "Ada was 8 in the heat of the moment." Charlotte's eyes flicked toward me then, and I could see the old reflex return. This was supposed to become about my sensitivity, my Americanness, my tone. But Philip was not offering that opening anymore. He let them talk long enough to reveal exactly what mattered to them: the house, the access, the money, the humiliation of having to explain a sale they had never actually controlled. Not once did either of them ask to apologize to Ada. Not once did they ask what she had felt standing at that curb. Philip stepped onto the threshold then, not aggressively, just enough to make the line visible. "The line was not the ticket," he said. "The line was using a child to punish her mother and spending my money while you did it." Charlotte opened her mouth, but he kept going. "You do not get to rename this into a misunderstanding because you dislike the consequences." Peter said the sale could wait until everyone calmed down. Philip said, "No." Charlotte asked whether he was really going to destroy family over one afternoon. He answered, "You did that yesterday." Then he gave them a deadline. They had until Friday evening to remove their personal things from the summer house. After that, access codes would change, the agent would have the keys, and anything left would be boxed and held for collection. Peter stared at him as if authority itself had just failed in public. Charlotte looked at me again, hunting for softness, and found none. For years, she had treated Philip as the son whose money, property, and patience were extensions of her own importance. Now he was standing in our doorway speaking to her like a man who had completed the last translation and was done. There was nothing left to negotiate. He closed the door while Charlotte was still talking. Not slammed, not theatrical. Just shut, latched, finished. Peter knocked twice, then stopped when it became obvious nobody was reopening anything. Through the frosted glass, we watched their shapes stand there for a few seconds longer, stunned by a boundary they could no longer talk around. After that, the practical pieces moved exactly the way Philip had said they would. He disputed the Tivoli charges, and they never got another kroner of access to his money. The card access stayed blocked. The transfers did not resume. The summer house went to an agent, then onto the market. Charlotte and Peter collected their things under a deadline instead of an invitation. Frederick stopped sending angry messages once he realized anger did not reopen locked systems. Contact ended because we let it end, We built a new normal instead. Months later, when my work offered a 1-year move to California, we took it. Ada called it our sunny year. Philip called it peace with palm trees. I called it proof that safety can be chosen after it is defended. Did my husband do the right thing by cutting them off and taking back the summer house? And was there any excuse for forcing an 8-year-old to get home alone after being put out of a family car, even in a safe area? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.
Thank you so much for watching. I worked so hard on that story. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Also, if you would like to listen to me narrating my own stories myself in character, then please check out my other channel.